So today we're going to have three presentations. We're going to have Seager, SIFA Professional, speaking about the transparency rules, the SRA's focus on these and the importance it holds. Then myself, Ashley Hull of Beaufort Financial, will be talking about the value of financial advice. And then my colleague Tony Gardner will be doing a case study on divorce and how we help clients through that process. So I'll now hand over to Dave. And if you do have any questions, please write them in the chat box.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. I found that a little bit blurry, but hopefully you can hear me. Today I'm going to be talking, as introduced, about transparency rules, but really not so much about the rules, more a case of why we have the rules as solicitors and why it might be a good idea to look beyond the rules and look at the principles behind the rules and the what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to encourage behaviour-wise, when the SRA brought those rules in. So at SIFA Professional, just a bit of background about us, if you haven't heard of us, we in various guises have been working with financial advisors since 1992, initially financial advisors within solicitors' practices when there were many of those, and we looked after over 200 at one point. Obviously less solicitors do that now. So we spend time working with good quality financial advisors and helping them understand solicitor market better and how they can better interact, more compliantly interact and provide benefit to mutual clients, where legal and financial overlaps, as it so often does. So that's what we do. We are business consultants, therefore, to good quality financial advisors that work with solicitors. And by definition, quite often, we extend the business consultancy to the solicitors that our members are working with. And that's really what today is about. So what I want to look at today is to recap along the sort of the lines of the future, the Look into the Future program the SRA introduced in 2016, sort of 3 years of reforms, culminating in the new standards and regulations in November of last year, but particularly focusing in on the fixed pricing and transparency rules that came in 2018, along with obviously the portrayal of digital badge, which is now compulsory. Look at why the SRA thought that was important, the background to it, the consumer research that sort of ushered in this new regime, and then look at the fact that the SRA do have reasonably sort of coherent policy around enforcement, suggests they're quite serious about it, and we'll look at that. And then really the nice side of the presentation is let's look at how we can best embrace the transparency rules and go beyond to really portray ourselves in the best way possible to not just existing clients, but more importantly, researching clients and potential customers going forward, which is where this really all began. And also, finally, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't look at perhaps how working interactively with other professionals, such as Beaufort, can be included in this transparency portrayal and how best to present yourself and differentiate yourself when you're searching for new clients via the way you present yourself, normally via your website. So going back, I'll look at the learning outcomes I hope to achieve, and I'll recap at the end. But obviously, I want to understand more around why the transparency rules came in. So let's look at the research and what led to that, and therefore that helps us inform what we need to do going forward. So how we might go beyond the core rules, to do more than the basics, when it comes to best practice, and understand. From my perspective and from my conversations with both the Law Society and the SRA, what might look good, what might look better than good when it comes to embracing transparency, and then obviously the interaction between yourselves and Beaufort from a financial planning perspective, and how you might wish to include that in the way you present yourself. So they're if you like, the four strands that we will come back to at the end. But let's go back to the beginning. So. When the SRA introduced the Look into the Future program, let's remind ourselves of why. As far as the standards and regulations, it was a case of focusing the rules on what matters, which is high professional standards. No one's going to argue with that. But it's the second point that really ties into the transparency. They wanted to make it easier for the public to access legal services, and obviously easier for you to do business. But it's the access to legal services and being informed about legal services that really led to the the element of the changes that are geared towards transparency that came in December of 2018, as we know. So what was this Look into the Future programme? And really there were four main strands, but I'm going to concentrate on the two that inform the transparency changes. So in the research that was done and that was presented to the SRA, we'll come on to that in a second, but by the Competitions and Markets Authority, the research of thousands of consumers identified that only 1 in 10 people were using a solicitor or a barrister when they had a legal problem. Now, that obviously presents a massive problem to the solicitor community, and as a regulator of the solicitor community, you know, the SRA wants to encourage changes that are going to change that. You know, they don't want, and nor do you, clients going to other forms of legal service provider or doing it themselves, or downloading something off the internet that may not be appropriate. You know, we want people to be getting the best legal advice, and we want them to come to you, and that's what the SRA wants. So that was one of the strands. But what came out of the research was the key reason for that is lack of information about legal services makes it hard for people to make informed decisions, and that weakens competition when you're competing with other legal services providers. So this is where the transparency part comes in. They wanted to look at why that was an issue, why consumers were telling them in their research that they find it difficult to understand, you know, what's available and what is involved in a particular aspect of any legal service. So this was the research that informed the changes. So when in the 6th of December 2018, as you will all know, the new transparency rules came in. Just a quote from Paul Phillip, the SRA's chief exec. You know, people with legal problems often struggle to find clear, understandable information to help them choose the right service. All the evidence shows they do not necessarily want the cheapest provider, but they do find having information on price helps with their choices. And I'll come back to that, but it's not about price. Obviously, it's about value. And if you have a price and everything that's involved in that price, that enables a researching consumer to derive in their own mind whether that is value for money. And that was the driver behind the changes. And it's very important to keep that in mind when you think about what we're trying to achieve. So let's go back and remind ourselves. So the Competitions and Markets Authority research led to the recommendations by the SRA and other legal regulators. They wanted to improve the information available for clients in the legal services market. The SRA did its own research, consulted and announced these changes in June, came in 6th December 2018. And there were two aspects. One was around the pricing of certain core services and how they were portrayed, and then also to make it clear what protections a consumer would have when dealing with you as an SRA regulated firm, which is obviously important and a key element of the changes. But I think we need to be quite alarmist first and look at the SRA market outlook, which was their own research prompted by the Competitions and Markets Authority. So just some of the headlines which caused the alarm. 35% of people with a legal need try to solve it without professional help. People want to be able to easily research price and discern quality when they're looking into it. And 28% of people do not use a solicitor because they assume they will be too expensive. Just some of the headlines at the time. For those who take professional advice, over a quarter research online, and I think that's probably not hyperbole. I think it's an underestimation, because I think we live in a Google society. I'm sure we wouldn't disagree. If you don't have a relationship with a solicitor or another legal services provider, and you find yourself in need as an individual, potentially in some legal advice or a legal service, you, in the same way as if you're researching a microwave or a television or a car, you will go online. It's what we do. And therefore, the website and the information and what is available to a researching consumer online is absolutely critical. And that's really the main thrust that I want to go through today, but that is absolutely essential. It also, in the research, more people expected fixed fees and online delivery of services. And the SRA and the LSB's research showed that people and businesses were more likely to use a solicitor whose prices were visible online. So these are some of the headlines that drove the changes. And they were approved after consultation, as you know. And Neil Buckley, the Chief Executive of the Legal Services Board, on approval of the proposals from the SRA, it should help to promote competition and contribute to improving access to justice, which obviously is what we all want. So let's hope that these changes, will do so. But I think there's a role for us all to play in ensuring that the spirit of the rules is accepted and embraced, which is what today's presentation hopefully will give you some pointers on. So just a reminder for the solicitors, you will be well aware of this. There are 7 core areas where you have to portray your prices and the services, what's involved with them, who's involved with them under the transparency rules. We'll look at exactly what you have to do. But these are the 7 areas. And I suppose as far as interacting with financial planners at Beaufort is concerned, probably the key areas within the 7 would be probate and residential conveyancing. But really, these are the most commonly accessed services. But what I don't want you to do is to think because you only have to do it in these 7, that's all you're going to do, because this is the tip of the iceberg, in my view. It's the start of a process. I've seen the SRA present on this on more than one occasion. I speak to the SRA most months. This is encouraging best behaviour. These are the 7 that you have to do it on. That is not going to stay that way, in my view. It will be a case of, as they're already saying, I saw a presentation last August from the SRA where they said, why would you only do, accept transparency, embrace transparency in the 7 core areas? It doesn't make any sense. And as I say to people, if you're looking at probate, the chances are you're doing that research because you have someone who's died intestate without a will. You might then go to the next section and think, well, I need to sort my will out. And if the same information is not readily available on the will section as it is on probate, that just looks odd. It leads to suspicion. So, these are the 7 core areas, but my view, and we'll talk through that, and the SRA's view is it's a principle that you should really accept and adopt and use across all areas of service that are important to you as a solicitor. So what you have to do is you have to, in the services that we've seen, you have to say which services are included in displayed price. So the breakdowns of any sections that go into a particular service, any services not included in your price that might be expected. For example, local authority search would be a good example. Disbursements that are outside of your particular elements that you're going to be billing for. And then the details and experience of the team or individuals who might carry out the work, and typically the timescales and key stages of the matter. These are the things that they would expect you to include and are requesting that you include under the transparency rules for those 7 key areas. But as I say, I would suggest going beyond would make more sense, and we'll look at that in more detail. So we now know the SRA badge, whilst optional on the 6th of December 2018, is now, as in line with the new standards and regulations on the 25th of November last year, is now compulsory. I didn't really understand why so many solicitors didn't adopt it straight away. This is a benefit. This is obviously a consumer can click on the badge and see exactly the protections, PI cover, client confidentiality, all the protections they get of dealing with you as an SRA regulated firm as against a non-SRA regulated firm. So I think this is important, and it's absolutely should be front and center on your website, which now obviously is compulsory. So that's we don't need to dwell too much on that, because that is, I think, accepted. But the attitude from the SRA from day one, I think, is very important. So within a month, this is Chris Hanford, who's the SRA Director of Regulation. They're taking it very seriously. He said straight away, we will soon begin random website sweeps looking at the compliance with the transparency rules. We will look to publish a guide about our proportionate enforcement on the transparency rules on the 6th of February, which they did do. So it's a clear indication that within 2 months of the new rules being established, there was going to be an enforcement guide, proportionate enforcement, a guide to proportionate enforcement. So it tells you very early on how serious the SRA is about transparency. And they said at the outset they would be undertaking thematic reviews. I think that is likely to be, the first thematic review will likely to be towards the back end of this year, from my understanding. They want to work with consumer groups and raise awareness of transparency and what it means. And they are going to be doing random web sweeps, which some of you may have been involved with. But the first one was in spring 2019, and we've just had the second one. So this is where it gets, for me, quite interesting. Within 6 months, we have had 500. Well, there's actually 500 websites looked at. A couple of them weren't working, which is I guess is worrying from the SRA's perspective. But, you know, if you're looking at 447 sites that were working, that were randomly swept by the SRA, 25% of solicitors, well done, fully compliant, 58% partially compliant, 17% totally non-compliant. Now that equates to 2,000 firms last May, 6 months into the regime, hadn't done anything, were completely in breach and not taking it seriously. You know, which is not good as far as the SRA is concerned, and they weren't very happy about it. And they're obviously now undertaking the second web sweep of 600 firms, just recently concluded, and we're waiting for the results on that. But early indications were not good, which I'll come on to. But the most common areas of failure last year: publish the required complaints information, that wasn't there; specify the amount of VAT was a common failure, and the cost of disbursements. And display information on the key stages. So people were saying, oh, I'll do the basic, I'll put, this is it, but they weren't actually breaking it down into the stages and the breakdowns, timescales, and the key disbursements, for example. So it's a case of doing the minimum and not providing enough, which was a common flaw, and also a description of the cost of likely disbursements, as I say. So these are all areas that the original research suggested led to the lack of consumer trust. So 6 months in, solicitors are still not embracing the elements that the research said is a problem for the researching consumer. The researching consumer wants the information, wants to understand the cost, wants the detail of the stages, and these are the areas where those that were failing or partially failing were doing so. So again, from the regulator's perspective, it's still an issue, and it will continue to be an issue until they get it right, I would imagine. So disappointed. Follow-up necessary. All firms in breach were written to. The new web sweeps will be every 6 months. And there was very strong hints in all their presentations last summer that, as I said before, firms really should look to go beyond the compulsory areas. You know, why would you only embrace the principles that are there for your benefit in these core areas? Why wouldn't you do it in all areas? Because at the end of the day, for your firm, those core areas may not be the most important areas to you. So why wouldn't you embrace transparency in the areas that are the most important to you? And they're continuing to work to raise awareness with the public. And they've announced there's going to be a thematic review, as I said, at some point. I believe it will be later this year. So they don't do thematic reviews on things they're not serious about, as you're probably aware. And we have had an update at the beginning of March this year to say they have done the next web sweep. And just in that update, the aim is to help people who currently struggle to shop around for legal services more easily find the information they need to help them find the right legal help for themselves. The rules also include using the clickable logo, which became mandatory last November, which verifies that you are a firm that we regulate and sells to the public. So there's the summary of what's important. But they did say at the end of the second web sweep, the second of these has been completed. Where we found non-compliance, we are considering potential enforcement. More checks on websites will follow. So this is in March, as recently as 2 months ago. There are still firms failing, and the SRA is going to continue working in this area until there is no failure. So embracing transparency is essential. It's not doing so is not an option. There's definitely no way the SRA are going to let this one go. And let's remember all the way through this, it's in your interest, because it's about portraying yourself in the best way you can to the researching consumer. Sorry, I think I might have, no. So, and there was a guidance, you can see the link on the SRA website. There's some fresh guidance, their tips, and I'm going to elaborate and expand upon what I believe are the tips for embracing transparency shortly. But, list the factors that might increase or decrease costs is one of their tips. Where there's a range of costs that are wide, consider suggesting an average, and consider how potential consumers like to interact with price. So the SRA is suggesting if there's a way you can use interactive IT, like a calculator, that is popular, but it's not popular if you're asking them to give personal data. So I think that's quite a good pointer from the SRA. So if you can have a calculator on your website, or an interactive tool that doesn't require them to put in their personal data, that's a trust tool. And that is a good thing to do, that embraces transparency, but also encourages the consumer to interact with your website without committing, which may seem like it may seem like not a good thing because you want to get that client detail, but you're earning their trust by offering them a chance to work on your website and use a tool without having to give their personal details. So that's a good SRA tip, I think. And be clear on preferential rates. If you've got rates for certain groups or for returning clients, be clear about that. That's another SRA tip that came in the March update that they issued on transparency. So from my perspective, I've been asked to write on this by various legal magazines. I've written on it for Modern Lawyer, for Central London Lawyer, and last year, and again 2 weeks ago, I was asked to write an article for the Law Society Small Firms Community, which was published a week last Friday. And that really is driven by this presentation and my thinking around, okay, let's look at how I can help solicitors via my SIFA Professional quality financial advisory firms to go beyond transparency, embrace transparency, and really look at how it's an opportunity. It's not a chore, and it's about differentiating your firm from your competitors. It can't be seen as a job you have to do. It has to be approached with an attitude of this is something we have to embrace. We have to do more than the minimum. If we just do the minimum, we are not going to differentiate ourselves from another solicitor in the same high street, or in the same area, if a consumer is researching 4 or 5 solicitor practices, which is what the research indicates they will do. And at a time when business is difficult in lockdown, in your very future, I'm not saying I'm a Daily Mail reader, but I did read the article that 72% of high street solicitors are in danger of going out of business. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying that's been widely reported. It was actually on the Law Society's own website. So the Daily Mail's only picked up on a Law Society survey. So the Law Society themselves are saying that high street solicitors are under threat because of the lack of business being done in this period. Obviously, you're not alone as an industry there, but you are in a time where you can take stock, you can reflect on what you do, and you can use this time valuably to make sure perhaps you're stronger and more approachable to the consumer when you come out the other side. So hence the timing of the articles I've been writing and this presentation for you. So I've just to make it a nice media style top 10, I've looked at 10 areas where I think as a firm of solicitors you can embrace transparency and go beyond compulsion. And that actually is the first tip. Do go beyond compulsion. There are compulsory areas where a starter, and I think limiting the principles to these areas is entirely illogical. Particularly, as I said earlier, if they're not your core strengths. If your core one of your core strengths is your family department and dealing with divorce, why wouldn't you want to portray that area of your work and your firm in the best possible way you can to a researching consumer? So going beyond compulsion is a no-brainer for me, and offer detailed information on price and service in the areas that you have to, and not in others. I think goes back to creating the suspicion in a consumer potentially in the same way that when they can't see full information of price, they are suspicious. As the research said, there's an assumption the solicitor is expensive just because they don't know whether you are or not, which can't be good. So there's your first tip. I think go beyond compulsion. Demonstrate value. A decision will be made on value and not price. So betraying absolutely everything you can possibly throw in there that might be involved in an overall cost is very, very good thing to do, because people will derive in their own mind what they perceive to be the value from all the things you're going to have to do for the price you're quoting. And the other thing to be aware of, and I'm not advocating it one way or the other, is the SRA's research did say that fixed prices are very popular these days with consumers. And I don't want to you may consider it a swear word, but co-op legal services, I'm very aware that the fixed prices aren't necessarily what the consumer is going to pay, but they've gone from nowhere in 2011 to a top 10 player in every market they're in, and they would advocate fixed pricing and they would advertise that they have fixed pricing. So it obviously is attractive to the consumer, and the research from the SRA said the same. So I'm not saying you have to do fixed pricing. It's an option to consider in certain areas, but what is key is putting as much information as you can in to describing the service you're going to offer the client to demonstrate the value. using plain language. And then another thing that's come out in the SRA and the Law Society's own guidance is very important to use non-legal or avoid using legal jargon if you can. You will probably remember, I'm sorry to keep swearing and saying the co-op, but you go back to the adverts about 3 years ago from the co-op using relatively well-known actors and showing at peak time, and they were taking the mick out of legal jargon. I think the chap came into a pub and the girl behind the bar said, "Can I obtain for you your habitual loquacious beverage?" And he said, "No, I'll just have my usual, please." And it's that do we use too long words when we don't need to? Do we use jargon that we don't need to? And this isn't just particular to solicitors, this is in any portrayal of service. And we would say the same in financial services, of course. So that's important. And also detail every step of the process in an easy to understand fashion. So that's critical. Look at your websites, look at your literature. Are you using legal jargon? Could you change that legal jargon to describe something in exactly the same service without using that jargon? Possibly you can. And if you can, now's a good time to be thinking about it. Biographies. I'm very, very hot on this. I think this is important. The guidance says you need to detail who's going to be involved in delivering the service. But this is a classic opportunity. Detailed biographies of all your staff involved in the delivery of service, and not just the lead solicitor, I think is important. You know, if you have paralegals, legal execs, admin staff behind the key solicitor, that's important because you're not always, as a consumer, going to be dealing with the lead solicitor. So include a photograph, I would say, all the qualifications and experience, and some personal detail. This is about personalising the experience at the research stage. If you can read about an individual, you can see that person's picture, you can feel like you're starting to develop a relationship on your website, and other solicitors aren't doing that. Again, it puts you in advantage. It's a case of giving consumer confidence and personalising at the early research stage. So absolutely critical that you have that on your websites and you embrace it. Blogs, very useful. Again, it's a way of portraying the knowledge of the key individuals, you know, as well as from the biographies on your website. If they write blogs, it's an extension to that biography. It demonstrates the competence and approachability of those individuals. And it also could involve key partners where service overlaps from advice from fellow professionals. So if you've worked, I know, in financial planning and legal services, you can have case studies where you've interacted on behalf of a client. So that's another thing. Invite your professional partners to be involved in writing blogs on your website, and I'm sure they will do the same for you. So that's a good area to sort of show to a client, look, we're not just the transactional high street solicitor. We recognise we need to be working more holistically. It's a good area. It's a good way to do it. And of course, one of the extensions of writing blogs is the use of social media. Having a social media profile, love it or hate it, is important. It demonstrates your own firm's and individual solicitors' credentials. But again, it's linking back to your website. So those blogs and on social media, they bring them back to your website. You know, what you want to do is bring people to your website, particularly if you're improving your website, because it's a case of the old analogy I would use is, you know, your website is the modern day shop window. The more attractive your shop window is, the more likely people are to walk through the door. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve by going beyond transparency. Consider using short videos. Very popular now. Short, and particularly this time, people are doing it on their phones at home. But short, concise videos can be an excellent way to explain the stages of a legal process. They can bring the services to life while simultaneously introducing the solicitors that the clients may be dealing with. Again, more early personalisation. And as with the blogs, they can be used on social media to pull visitors to your website. So these are all just extra tools that enable you to embrace transparency, go beyond it, and the end game is the same. You want your website to be seen in a way by a researching consumer that makes you the firm they're going to decide upon. And these are all tools to make you do that, which is what transparency is all about. It's not, keep stressing, it's not about doing the minimum. It should be about doing the maximum. So accreditations and awards are obviously important. You've worked incredibly hard to be where you are as a solicitor. Individual accreditations for a firm and for an individual should be proudly displayed. absolutely no question. And particularly if you've got key accreditations that within a particular field, whether it be TEP, whether it be solicitors for the elderly, whether it be resolution, demonstrate that you as a firm require your individuals to attain high levels of professionalism. And that's critical, I think, as well. Don't be ashamed of it, be proud of it, and proudly display, that for your firm and that for your individuals. Testimonials. I think people think they're a bit trite. I'm not sure they are. I think it's very important to have a testimonial section, certainly on your site and in the core areas for you as your business. Potential clients do take confidence from the knowledge that you've recently helped others in similar circumstances. And and with those testimonials, again, can you include testimonials from fellow professionals that you work closely with? Will the key individuals at Beaufort who've referred work to you be happy to tell your clients how happy they were that they'd referred their clients to you? Yes, they will. Make use of it. And be sure you keep them fresh, because the worst thing in the world is thinking you've done a great job with putting testimonials on your website and in 2 years' time, it's still the same testimonials. So it's a very positive thing. If you don't keep it up to date, it can quickly become a negative. So if you're going to do it, and I suggest you do, make sure you have somebody responsible for keeping that fresh and updating it on a regular basis. And lastly, and the bit obviously I want to major on, number 10 is let's embrace holistic service here. Are we a transactional solicitor because we're forced into it or because we want to be it, or do we want to recognise that our work very much requires complementary advice from other professions such as accountants or financial planners? And it's critical that we embrace that when we're going to consider portraying ourselves in the most efficient way and the most professional way and the most attractive way to a researching client. So we know the modern client requires a holistic approach to problem solving. As a client, I have a set of problems. I don't think I want to go to 3 or 4 different people to get 4 different sections of that problem solved. I just want to go somewhere that there is a process to get my problem solved. So it's very important that your website reflects that where you need to be referring them to someone where there's work outside the bit that you can do, that your website reflects that. Because if you don't, and another firm of solicitors does reflect it, then the client thinks, well, actually, I know I'm getting divorced. I know my pensions are going to be looked at. And this firm says that they work with quality financial advisors who are specialising in pension divorce work. Well, I'm obviously going to go there rather than the solicitors that just talked about the legal aspect of divorce. So it's a simple thing, but it's an important thing. So you want to show the researching client that you work with carefully selected colleagues from other professions. Accountants, financial planners are the most obvious. So carrying on with that theme, the SRA requires businesses they regulate to have an established process. You're now aware of this. Everything, now there's a firm code of conduct. Everything that you do, your compliance officer, your management have to have a process. There has to be governance and structure around everything that a consumer will embrace or experience when they come to your firm. And obviously third-party referral is no different. So if you have gone through a process, which I hope you have, and if Beaufort Reading are one of the firms you're going to look to work with, I don't think you need to name the firms you're going to work with on your site, but I think it's important to reference that you have undertaken a process or a process of research and due diligence, and as a result, you have a system and a process that all your company uses when it comes to the need for ancillary or complementary advice. So make sure that that's on your website if you can. And if a client's researching which firm to approach with a set of problems, the firm that offers to assist them directly or indirectly in all those problems will obviously stand out over the firm that doesn't portray themselves in that fashion. So to summarize that, really, this is your opportunity to demonstrate the completeness of your service. Are you selling a transaction or are you selling a client service? And ensure that your potential clients know that you recognize its service is likely to need complementary advice. We work with other professionals here when it is in your best interests. So that's really, really important for me. And it's a real differentiator when it comes to the consumer researching on your website. It really is going beyond transparency to the furthest degree. And why wouldn't you if you can? So to summarise the learning outcomes that I set out, I hope you appreciate the rules, the research that led to the change of rules. It's important, I think, to understand why the SRA is asking you to do what they're asking you to do, and perhaps go beyond it. I think in anything in life, if we understand the reasons and the purpose of things, we're more likely to embrace them. I think going beyond the core should be seen as best practice. I don't think it's too long before you're going to have to. So don't be the follower. Be the leader. It's all about differentiation and attracting, researching customers. So your website is the tool. The further you go, the more you're going to differentiate. So that's what I'm trying to get across today. I hope I have. And lastly, there is practical guidance. I've given you some. It's not exhaustive. It's the areas where, in my research and my discussions with the regulator and other people, these are the areas that you can easily go beyond transparency in the way you present your firm to the researching consumer. And lastly, and importantly for today's audience, is take the opportunity to present yourself as a firm that recognises you can't act in a silo. You have to work with other professionals, because if that's evident in your website, you're part of that team that wants to deliver a trusted advisor experience, not act in a silo. So again, I think that's very, very important. And really, now I'm going to hand back to the guys at Beaufort, and if there's any questions, obviously we'll cover them off at the end.
Hi, Dave. Thank you very much for that. That was really useful, some really interesting facts there, and actually some ideas that I think not just law firms should take on board, but also other professionals. We do have a question. We do have a question actually, which I think I'll read out to you, and then I think actually both you and I can answer this. So the question is there an expectation that it's solicitors introduce to financial advisors that they follow the same standards of transparency?
Well, the SRA, it's a question I get asked often is, okay, we understand what the referral rules are, but if we decide as a firm we don't wish to make referrals, we won't make referrals. And I asked the SRA about that, and the new regulations have 7 principles, and the SRA's answer to me was, if as a solicitor you identify that a client needs complementary financial advice, and it's obvious from the legal work you're doing, and you don't make a referral, the SRA's view that you would be in breach of 2 principles. You wouldn't be acting in the client's best interest, and you wouldn't be acting with integrity. So there's the first part of the answer. I think to not refer is singly not an option. And the second part is that you have to, within the referral process, you have to do one thing, and you may have to do 2 things. You have to demonstrate the client's best interest are being served, and that to me indicates quality due diligence and research to decide which firms, as a firm of solicitors, you are going to refer to. And in the old rules, you then had to, the client had to be in a position to make an informed decision and give their informed consent. So that would suggest to me you make the due diligence available to the client. The only slight area between what's compulsory and what's best practice is the client's informed consent. If there is a fee, or if it's a joint venture and there's a fee being shared, you have to gain the client's informed consent. If it's just a referral to Beaufort from a solicitor's and there's no fee involved, you don't have to gain the client's informed consent within the rules, but the spirit suggests you probably would, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be transferring personal data, so you need their consent anyway. And secondly, a lot of work done by solicitors will involve dealing with vulnerable clients. So if you're dealing with vulnerable clients, recently divorced, recently bereaved, you would almost definitely want to get the client's consent before making the referral. And we have at SIFA Professional, obviously available to you, we have an informed consent precedent, which the SRA have seen and are happy with it. So it's not compulsory, but it's very much best practice. So I think, yes, you should be absolutely honest and upfront as a firm of solicitors that you have a process, and the process has identified appropriate third parties, whether it be accountants or financial planners, and the client needs to be able to understand why that's in their best interest and keep their consent.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I suppose the financial advisor response to that question is, again, we do speak with all our clients, ask them if they do have a will in place, and do refer work out to solicitors and accountants who do need it. And in terms of the transparency from how financial advisory firms work, is we have to tell clients what fees are going to be before work is completed. That's both on an initial and an ongoing basis. And as well, I'll sort of come onto it in my presentation next, but actually, if you are an advisor who is restricted by whatever means that is, they may not work in certain aspects, you may not do certain things, that also has to be explained to the client at the beginning as well. So I can't see any more questions pop up, and that actually perfectly comes onto my presentation on really the value of advice that we believe we give to clients here at Beaufort. So I'm going to really follow three areas here: how we advisors at Beaufort work, who needs advice, and why you would use an advisor. So at Beaufort, we are independent financial advisors. So as I've just mentioned, we don't have any restrictions in terms of what we do. We're whole of market advisors, and we act as a fiduciary for the client. By being a fiduciary, we act on the client's best interest. We are based on their client's circumstances. I suppose the only simple way I can really explain it is, if you're a client and you rang up a pension provider and said, I need a pension, the pension provider would facilitate that transaction and you would receive a pension. However, whoever has told you to take that pension isn't acting on the client's best interest, but really acting on the interest of the company. They're not really looking at the client. So as I said, what is a fiduciary? The other things we look at in terms of what we do for a client is client understanding, knowing your client. And also we do cash flow planning and produce financial planning report. So client understanding, know your client is really the Financial Conduct Authority's biggest bugbear. Know your client is something that's asked many times, and do you know it? This really isn't just knowing what the client's name is, their wife's name, their husband's name, their children's name. It's really knowing what it is they want to do, what it is they're looking for, what their goals and objectives are. This goes, further. We're really paid to ask tough questions and dig deeper into what they're looking to do and what they need from a financial advisor. And for two people in retirement, that can be completely different things. We very rarely do two different clients have the same goals and objectives, and our job is to find out really what they are and how that can then happen. So if you have seen one of our presentations before, you will have seen the cash flow planning tool that we use for all of our clients. Tony is actually going to give a presentation which shows that in a bit more detail, and really the value the visual effects and the value it adds. The benefit of cash flow planning, and we think that actually our job isn't possible without the use of it, is that we look at the client's financial situation now and also going forward. We also are paid to ask tough questions. If there is a potential shortfall in retirement, we have to find out with the client, is this something that they're comfortable with? Are there other areas that we can look at to help maybe mitigate that shortfall, whatever it may be, whether it be more, pension, if they've got other things, how are they looking to fund their retirement, or whatever their financial goals may be. And really ask the question of, if you can't fund this currently, what's the long-term plan? What else is it that you may do, or that you can do to help with this? And also we can show them how the advice does help the client. We can show them various situations. It shows us everything. We can say, this is you now, this is you if you take advice, this part of advice, and how it will benefit them really. So for any of our solicitors or accountants or existing clients, we produce a financial planning report. This financial planning report, or suitability report as it's sometimes known, is quite a lengthy document, but it takes on board everything that we've discussed: where the clients are, where they're trying to get to, what their financial goals and objectives are, what investments they have, what pensions they have, what bank accounts they have. And it's a bespoke document based on their situation and what the advice is going forward. It also explains the reasons why the advice is suitable, how it helps them, what it's looking to do. And actually, sort of to come back to that question, it also has all fees involved. So not just our fees, but if there are any other fees, such as if the client has an ISA and the ISA has fees attached to it, it also goes into that. So a question that we often get asked is, who needs a financial advisor? Why would I need a financial advisor? Why would my friends or whoever? And really, these are questions that I've picked up from various meetings over my time at Beaufort. And really, these are all things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And actually, reading through those, I would argue that the classic argument is everybody needs a financial advisor. But if these are questions that your clients, your colleagues, your friends and family are having, then these are the people that we do help here at Beaufort and along the way. So often it's people say, oh, well, I do have those questions, but why should I use an advisor? Well, the first part I've got here is it's advice over guesswork. In a similar way to, you can write your own will, you can be your own accountant, you can do all of these jobs that professional services do yourself. You can do that, but you're not taking advice on that. And the majority of people, you are guessing. There's no security involved in it, and it's kind of, you may research it on the internet, but you're not getting true advice. An interesting quote I read actually from another financial advisor said, a family or an individual make 100 financial decisions over their lifetime. The job of the financial advisor is to help them through those 100 decisions and make sure that they make the right one and understand the options available in whichever way they go. Peace of mind, I'd argue, is a big one. Having, as a client, if you know that someone is looking after your financial affairs in the same way, using a solicitor or an accountant, having a professional do it on your behalf gives you peace of mind. It also gives you security knowing that a professional is looking after it, and also the value add that advisors do add with those decisions and all the areas that we look at. Vanguard, who are actually a fund house, one of the largest fund houses in the world, with billions under management, looked at the financial advice arm and thought, what is the advice that clients get from advisors? They worked out that actually, by having an advisor, the average client actually is better off by 3% a year. Well, if, like many of our clients, you've been with, your financial advisor, have been with Beaufort, for 10 or more years, there's a lot to add in there over that time frame, ensuring that you are making those right decisions. I suppose in here, what I've done here is I've just put a little bit of client feedback that we've had, and some of this, actually, as Dave said, is on our website from various clients. And for us, the value add is helping clients achieve their financial goals. What is it that a client is trying to achieve, and how can we help get them? Retirement is one of the biggest factors for people. The day they don't have to work again and all that sort of thing. But helping their family as well. And really, that's where we pride ourselves here at Beaufort, is being able to add value to clients on an initial and ongoing basis through their financial journey, to help them achieve their goals. Well, I can't currently see any questions, but I'll now hand over to Tony. And if you do have any questions for myself or Tony, please do ask at the end of Tony's presentation.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Ash. Hopefully everyone can hear me. What I'd like to do today, I'm one of the team of advisors at Beaufort Financial, based in Reading. Today, what I'd like to do is take you through a recent case study that I completed with a client that was about to begin a divorce proceeding and who wanted to know the options open to them before it actually began. As part of our holistic financial planning services, we look at all aspects of clients' financial needs. The slide above just shows part of that process, where we look at the whole picture, the short term and long term. We build anything from a plan together based around the facts and figures. We obviously advise initially, but also can advise ongoing. But one of the most important things that we do is we work collaboratively with solicitors and accountants. There are a number of aspects that is needed to be understood before any decisions can be made by any parties. How do their finances currently look if they were to stay together? What is the outlook? If this may seem slightly pointless when you've got people looking to get divorced, but however, often is a surprise to couples exactly what they have together and how their finances also look together. Then we look at what is classed, I suppose, from the client's perspective is the important bit. What do their financial futures look like as separate entities? And how has this been calculated in the fairest way from a financial point of view? And who, if anyone, has a shortfall? We also offer a what-if scenario so that if you look at split assets as equal as possible to take into account all the external factors of the agreement, such as custody of children and pension pots held by both parties. This is normally led by the client or their solicitor. As an example for today, we have the Parsons case. So the Parsons family is made up of John and Jane, both of which have 25 years of their working life ahead of them before they retire. And the children, Neil and Jen, who are likely to still be dependent for at least 10 to 12 years. These are the base numbers that we take into account before forming a financial plan for them. So what we have here is, as you see, the current situation, but these numbers will vary per client. In some cases, we've worked on have more complexity, but we also want to show you a simple case today. Pretty standard setup. Numbers may vary, but in most cases we'll have a similar situation. So we've got a main residency currently worth 400. We've got a holiday home in this one. We've got some ISAs, a couple of pension pots, and obviously a state pension. And John's got an investment pot of 15,000. But they do have some debt. They've got some mortgage on the main residence of 200,000. They've got a mortgage on the holiday home of 100,000. And John has some credit card debt of £7,500. So this screen just gives us a current situation once we put information into our cash flow modelling. It's a detailed screen that lists all assets and liabilities, as well as income and expenditure. And we put together in what we class as a life plan for our clients. Obviously, this can be edited as much as required, but includes one-off future expenses and obviously all costs that they want to add in there. In this circumstance, we've actually added the children as expense. Most parents would probably agree that that's probably pretty much a good description of where kids are until they leave at 18. But understanding every part of the client's finances allows us to complete the cash flow plan. So the current cash flow, assuming they were staying together, just gives you a picture on screen here. Although this may look a little bit complicated, it's a simple way for us to view their current and future financial situations. This would be used in any form of mediation, and it would show together what the current situation is looking forward for the clients. But as you can see from here, the client, the Parsons do not have any financial issues based on their current situation. The earnings are good, 80,000 per annum. They still have an additional income of 10,000 a year coming in from the holiday home, and income in retirement is going to be circa about £50,000 a year. However, they are not together. They're now deciding they're going to divorce. So this is going to change for their individual plans going forward. So what information will we need to create this plan? So if the client has gone and taken legal advice, there would be a Form E, which give us the information. If they're starting the process before they formulated the relationship with a solicitor, then obviously we would need personal details, pay slips, and projected state pensions and various things that we can start building up that information. So John and Jane's main priorities, as we can see here from the objectives, are the children. The children are obviously forefront in any court decision-making process, and often people think that an asset split of 50-50 is the best decision, which may or may not be the case. As an example, if we take pensions, if you're 35 years old and pension in settlement is no use to you if you've got another 20 or more years. So it could seem to be a good solution at the time, but unless you have some cash flow coming in from some income, it may be a bit of a problem to you. But what we're seeing here is that both parties obviously want the children to stay in the family home. There's the pension of 200,000, and the equity in the main residence is 200,000. So assuming they split that 200,000, it doesn't give them in the official financial impacted situation immediately, but we also need to understand the mortgage options available to them individually, and particularly Jane, as her income is significantly lower than John's. So we can create this split as a potential solution, which we thought was relatively fair, and the client solicitor told us that this would potentially work. The two options when we're doing this to create a slip plan is that we can create a plan looking at the potential split, or we could actually be led by the client in their view of what the split would look like. Both have the ability to be edited with a variety of scenarios, but also if a proposed split has been discussed, we can create this and show clients where there may be financial issues now or in the future. But as we see from the screen, is that the potential split sees that Jane retains the main residence. However, John has taken the holiday home and retains his pension, and they both retain their own ISAs, and John keeps his investment portfolio and his credit card debt. John is also paying a significant amount of child maintenance for a 10-year period. Okay, so we're starting to see Jane's individual plan here, and obviously we're seeing a lot of red on the plan. So what that tells us is there's shortfalls in which is indicated by the red plan. It's indicated that the income does not meet expenditure. So on the face of it, a 50-50 split doesn't work for Jane. So what are Jane's options? So yeah, these may or may not be possible, but Jane would need to find a job paying around about 30,000 per annum. She'd also need to save any excess income whilst at work to help her in her retirement. And Jane would need to potentially downsize the family home when the children were no longer dependent to help cover her shortfall. And the possibility of considering insuring John's maintenance payments, which may help her in the future. Okay, so by doing all of what we've just said, again, just reiterate that may or may not be possible, but assuming that she does, the proposed solution means that Jane does not have a shortfall for 14 years. However, there was a large shortfall in retirement, which is indicated by the red bars on the right-hand side of the screen. Although this is still a long way off, it does mean that she will have to think about how she can plan for the future. An option may be to downsize when the kids move out, or maybe even look for a better paid job if that's achievable. But one thing it does do, it gives Jane a bit of time to plan. It gives her a bit of time to put those plans or future plans in place. Okay, so John's side of the split. So we've had to increase John's expenditure, not just by the maintenance payments for the 10 years, but also his living costs, because now he has nowhere to live except the holiday home. He will now have to pay a rent or a mortgage cost and his bills in any new property that he potentially rents or buys. So John's options really, again, may not be possible, but John needs to receive a pay rise in the future, and John needs to save any excess income to provide for his future in retirement, and possibly even sell the holiday home at some point. So from a cash flow position, what we're seeing here is This includes John getting a pay rise of £8,000 a year, but there is still shortfall in retirement, which you'll see in the red. However, he has excess above the black lines in the blue on the side here, and that excess during his working life is a potential option is to save that and invest it for the future, which will soften the red shortfall in retirement. Okay, so as Ash mentioned earlier, for all our clients, and particularly in divorce cases like this, we use cash flow modelling before and during procedures. It's a very good tool to show clients exactly how their finances look. As you can see from before proceedings, it allows us and the client the ability to create their ideal situation, permits them to make changes to see if they could absorb any proposed solution from the other side, and also gives us the ability to build new plans can be drawn up for each eventuality, so that in shortfall are clear to each client. But even during the procedures itself, it gives the client the opportunity to demonstrate the viability of the proposed solution and what effect it may have on them now and in future years. So cash flow really just takes away the guesswork. It gives, before any proposal is accepted, there is no guessing if the client will be okay in 5 or even 10 years' time. It just shows a short-term and long-term view to the finances. It's important to understand where these shortfalls occur and whether the client can manage these. So the sort of things that that we're seeing on screen here are the things that we consider when putting together a plan. So again, mortgage options, as Jane would need another mortgage, and potentially her earnings wouldn't be that great, but it gives the ability to see what borrowing capacity she would have and build that into a report. Obviously, family protection for life and income protection, pension sharing options, and obviously from the estate planning aspects, and look at big university planning costs that we would need to build into any future plans if people have children. So as I say, that pretty much finishes our presentations for the day. I haven't seen any questions come up, but obviously if there are, we'll take those. Alternatively, if there isn't, then in conclusion, on behalf of Ash and myself, I'd like to thank you all for sharing some time with us today. I hope that you found the topic we discussed useful and informative. I would also like to say a big thank you to Dave Seager for his presentation. Very informative as always, Dave. Thank you very much for that.